Energy, Fuels, Levies and References Amendment Bill, Committee Stage. Gambling Amendment Bill Number 2, Committee Stage continued. Parole Amendment Bill, Committee Stage.
I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Energy, Fuels, Levies and References Amendment Bill, for further consideration of the Gambling Amendment Bill Number 2 and for consideration of the Parole Amendment Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Speaker. The House is in committee on the Energy, Fuels, Levies and References Amendment Bill, further consideration of the Gambling Amendment Bill Number 2 and consideration of the Parole Amendment Bill. Members, we turn first to the Energy, Fuels, Levies and References Bill. The question is that Part 1 stand part.
Mr.
Chairman. The Honourable Member, Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to take part in this committee stage of the Energy, Fuels, Levies and References Bill, sir. The purpose of this bill is that it seeks to amend the Energy, Fuels, Levies and References Act 1989. That's because New Zealand has an oil stockholding treaty obligation under the Agreement on the International Energy Programme, and the bill proposes to expand the purpose of the Petroleum or Energy Fuel Monitoring Levy to include the cost of meeting the oil stockholding energy treaty obligation. While it's important to meet our international obligations, it's also concerning that this could see petrol costs rise higher, and highlights the government's inaction on developing alternative energy sources. So we know that we need to have security of energy supply, and we appreciate on this side of the House, sir, that that is what this bill seeks to achieve, is to ensure that we have a stockpile of fuel resources in the event that some crisis should befall us and our supply of fuels and energy is somehow cut off, that we have an appropriate stockpile of fuel so that the country can carry on. And in the interests of good economic management, this is a treaty that New Zealand has signed up to. So, sir, yes, we have been happy to work alongside the government to ensure that we do meet our international treaty obligations. We have had situations in the past where this government has failed to move quickly enough on international treaty obligations, and of course probably the example of that the public knows best is the Rena disaster, where we ended up carrying far more cost than we ought to have had we passed legislation to ensure that we met our treaty obligations. So, sir, this is an important piece of legislation. It's important because it secures our economic well-being, and it's important because it ensures that New Zealand is a good international operator and that we meet our international obligations, sir. But it is a bit of a concern that it may force fuel prices up. Now, right here and now, your ordinary New Zealander on the street might not think that that's too much of a concern, because as we drive past the BP and the Mobil and the Caltex, we're seeing some numbers up there that we haven't seen for quite some time, numbers that don't start with a 2, which is probably quite pleasing to the New Zealand public. I haven't yet heard the government try to take responsibility for that. I'm sure they will at some point in time, because it's the only good economic news that any New Zealander is seeing right now. But the price of fuel is certainly lower than it has been for some time. So a little bit of an increase in the price of fuel might not be something that right now is too much of a concern. But of course we know that this government has hiked the fuel taxes up to pay for their unaffordable roads of national significance, in recent times fuel prices have been extraordinarily expensive, and an increase in the price of fuel can be a significant constraint on our economy, and it can put a lot of pressure on families, particularly vulnerable families whose income is unstable and insecure and need to know that they are going to be able to afford the basics in life, such as being able to fill up the card so that you can get the kids to school. So whilst it's important that we do meet our treaty obligations, and whilst it's important that we do have security of supply, we do note that one of the consequences of this passing this legislation could be the rising cost of fuel. And we implore the government to ensure that ordinary working families have enough income and stability of income to be able to afford those types of additional costs that come with the passing of legislation like this. So New Zealand does have a treaty obligation under an international energy program to contribute 90 days of net oil imports to the IEA oil stockholding. The collective stockholding mitigates the market power of oil-producing countries, and releasing stock during an IEA-declared oil supply emergency helps to moderate extreme oil price spikes. As I said, the price of oil does move around quite a lot, not too bad at the moment, but when OPEC decides to exert their power, so then it can have significant impacts on the New Zealand economy.